Hello there. I'm Mary Edwards here with Dave Barnett, aka Dave the Mystic, here on the talk show this morning. How are you doing today, Dave?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Glad to have you here and talk a little bit about DNA and hybridization program. I know I've worked with you for a long time on many different situations, and this is one that we know well, and it's a very interesting topic I think we'll be sharing today. So Dave the Mystic is not only a mystic, but he is a rocket scientist, and he has many gifts, and he will share some of them with you right now. He'll explain more about his alternative healing that he's done since the 1980s, and some of the programs and classes and some of the treatments that he does. And then we'll dive into a talk about DNA, family ancestry, and my 128 hybrid children and how the whole hybridization process works, because it's still pretty confusing to people. But anyway, I'm delighted to have you here today, and I'd love you to explain to everyone what your beautiful gifts are and skills are.
Happy to. Well, I started developing my gifts in 1983. I was already into my career as an electrical engineer and an aerospace engineer at the time. And that's when I discussed in our last interview. I ran into an old friend at my 10th high school reunion, and he showed me phenomenal things that he could do with his mind with electronics and electrical devices. And that caused me to return to Denver from Wichita and start digging into this. I had to know what was going on. Uh, I started viewing that a lot of the engineering models and things that we use were very effective at designing electronics, but they really didn't help explain the nature of the universe. And what this person showed me was extraordinary things in terms of what he could do with just simple mind power and mind energy. So I came back to Denver and I got involved in several different paths. One was energy healing, another one was psychic development, a third one was joining a group that was channeling ascended masters and teaching how to do channeling for these exalted beings. Very powerful messages. So the healing was particularly fascinating to me. As I look back over my career, first off, I always tell people in sort of a joking way, if I'd seen looking forward the stepping stones I was going to be on to where I am now 40 years later, I would have run screaming from the room. I can look backwards and say that is a very logical path that Spirit laid out for me, but it was not something that I anticipated. So I feel particularly blessed and humbled by the number of things that the spiritual realm has done for me to give me demonstrations, to show me how things work, things like that. But going back to the healing, I've really come to the philosophy, and it's reflected in my web radio show, that everything is about healing. Healing comes through. I think Jesus blessed a lot of people with healing gifts. His followers were blessed with those gifts. Um, it's I think it's one of the most spiritual and sincere ways that you can follow of helping others is to do healing work. And I talk on my show that healing comes in many forms, and so um, mediumship, a reading may be very healing for you to understand that your loved one in spirit is still alive, still conscious, still aware of you, and still interacting with you. And that is a very healing experience, especially for somebody going through bereavement. Healing comes in other forms. If people have core beliefs, internal subconscious beliefs that are hindering their life, hindering how they have love relationships or their financial security or their interactions with others that always lead to hardship. If you can work with those core beliefs to update them and change them, and I have a system for doing that, that's also very healing. So, learning about past lives, why some past lives may be coming through, why they may be reaching forward in time, and their aches and pains or difficulties or challenges or oaths and vows, those things reach forward and influence you. If I can help you discern those and help you release yourself from those, again, that's healing. So, although I have a number of different healing modalities that I've learned, these will include therapeutic touch, the healing touch program. I went through all the way through there to get their certification. UN method is another one that works with core beliefs. Theta healing also works with core beliefs. I like theta healing because it has a technique that I use quite a bit where I descend into people's DNA and I can find mistakes or errors or coding problems in their DNA that need to be corrected. And so I work with that. So that's one of the advantages in that system. I've had Reiki training, so I'm familiar with the Reiki method. Reiki is a little bit different than some of the other energy healings in that they involve a lot more with dealing with downloads. So a Reiki practitioner may be working with you, but they may also get intuitive inspiration messages, things like that, that are helpful to you either during the session or after the session in the debrief to understand what's going on. So these things are all very important to me. Other gifts that I use, I was given sort of a demonstration in the spiritual plane on how to do karma burning. And so I have a session that I take a person through a guided meditation, and they end up disconnecting from all the karma from all lifetimes, which I think is very helpful. From my point of view, our universe is approaching a point of not having karma anymore. Why I feel this way is we're coming up to some major shifts, and they may be in the very near term future. We may be talking a matter of years or maybe just a few decades, but I don't see us going on the same path we're on right now for hundreds or thousands of more years. I just don't see it. And that type of time frame would be necessary for an incarnation cycle or reincarnation cycle for people to come back and experience all the different facets of karma as we traditionally think about it. So if you're the bad guy in this life and you shoot Bob, then in the next lifetime you might come back where now you get to be the victim and Bob's the shooter, so you can see what the experience is like. And you might come back in another lifetime where you're Bob's mother and you had to go through the grief of losing a son who's been shot deliberately. We don't have that kind of time frame anymore. It's moving too fast. I'm sure all the people watching this can look at society and wonder, this thing is speeding up so fast. What is the logical conclusion? And I can't necessarily tell you exactly what's the outcome is going to be, but it is certainly coming up to a major energy or vibrational shift in how we do things. We see it in the climate. So whether or not you believe it's man-made cause, there is climate change going on. If you look at the financial markets, uh, golly, we couldn't even think of cryptocurrencies 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, that would have seemed like black magic. And now people are exploring those. And frankly, I'm not going to invest in them, but some people do. So we see that as a new financial market. We see technology just continuing to zoom forward in ways that uh, whatever we think is out there in the public domain, such as the internet or smart robotic tools that comb the internet looking for information. I'm sure that the people who do the spy work have tools that 10 or 20 years in advance of what we can even conceive of them doing. So all these things are moving so fast forward. Uh, there are estimates that our rate of knowledge accumulation that we're doubling the sum total of all knowledge of mankind within a space of every 2 to 3 years.
Right.
And again, that's an exponential increase. If you think about how fast did information propagate in Roman times or in the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, where people had, scribes had to write it down and recopy it and include errors a lot of times. How fast did information travel then? Whereas you look at it now, what you can find on the internet, and something that I never anticipated. When they were talking about the internet, I thought this is great because despotic rulers around the world will not be able to hide anymore. There will be people out there who report them, who talk about what they are. Um, I guess in my being a little bit naive, I didn't anticipate the pushback on that with all the false information out there too. And so now you can't just look at something on the internet and say, well, I assume that this guy talking about what's happening in Gambia and Africa is giving us the God's honest truth. He may be a propagandist for what's going on there. We don't know. And
The
so
forms of
all these things are
communication are really
zooming.
changing, right? I mean, we
Yeah,
really are in
it's
a
changing so
revolution, a
fast.
renovation, a reboot, a reset. Everything, as you and I've talked about before, it is a time of speed, partly because of the help from our ET friends.
Hmm.
Look at Roswell, when my dad was there with Werner von Braun in 1951. Look at it
Hmm.
today, when I was born, when you were born, almost when you were born. Things are accelerating, and all the new kids are growing up. Look at the hybridization program
Hmm.
that I was part of, as we know, for 94 generations. It was totally different when I went on a craft at 1955 and 56 and when I was 10 years old. Now it's bingo, it's organic, so
Yeah.
everything is crashing and burning right now to change, to be able to facilitate and keep up with the spiritual awakening going on.
Hmm.
Now, our politics, religion, everything is shifting and changing as we speak. And so, yeah, we have to, if we want to help accelerate consciousness and spiritual awakening in ourselves and others, we've got to really do the hard work and go deep inside and talk to people like you and have me do interiors and all of us that are here today and working hard to keep up with and also fine tune what DNA is, fine tune what consciousness is.
Hmm.
I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about frequency. Now it's consciousness. Now AI is just sliding into all different things.
Hmm.
So I think, I know you're right. It's fascinating how quickly our lifetime has gone in the last 60, 70 years for us.
Yeah,
And
but I don't want people
accelerating.
to be afraid of this. So I think this isn't the end of the world. Uh, when you see a caterpillar spin a chrysalis, the caterpillar actually dissolves. It becomes a little bag of liquidy goo, and then the butterfly forms out of that liquidy goo and uses that as the constituents so that it can emerge and then take off. So it's not just that the caterpillar sort of transformed a little bit and dropped some of its legs. It went through the whole hog transformation, and it's not a bad thing. It's a delightful thing, but it can be painful for that caterpillar probably to
Right.
go into the chrysalis and feel itself kind of going to mush. We're
Well,
kind of going to
why would
mush on the planet. We're
right?
going to see what's going to emerge.
And that's what's exciting. This is what life does. This is what's gone on for millennium, from Noah's Ark, and every time. And we are at the end of a cycle and the
Hmm.
beginning of a new cycle. So you're right. We have to really help guide people, help ourselves and everyone not get stuck in the fear, but look at the opportunities if we keep our minds open and try to keep a little bit updated with who we are and how we live and refresh, use personal hygiene, emotional hygiene, spiritual hygiene, like how you clean entities, I clean spaces. We can hopefully, we will be around and we will succeed on
Yeah.
this planet Earth, but it's going to be down to the last drop, basically.
Hmm.
And partly what we're going to talk about today is, DNA and ancestry and how we watch the cycles of that forever, and what we learn and what we grow and what we know and what we learn from people like you going through past lives.
Hmm.
I mean, I'd like to just talk about myself for 2 minutes. I'm Mary Edwards. I'm here to talk, and I am an interior designer and an artist, and have gone through many, many cycles in my own 70 years of life here, trying to figure out what those past life things meant when I was 18 years old and the astrologer that I went to. And I've spoken to you a lot about my family DNA and how the Pleiadians and Arcturians and Sirians and Andromedans and the different programs I've been involved with have really supported me from day one. My father, my grandfather, my ancestry that went all the way back from rocket science. My dad and my grandfather were rocket scientists who designed and manufactured heavy rocketry, as you know, and had a long history with their family ancestry that you've been helping me dig out this last year, which has been really exciting, to find out exactly why was I in a craft with my father at age 5 and 6 and 10.
Hmm.
I've been going up until a couple of weeks ago working on inside sub-zero, subsurface planet enhancement, as I've been doing from a child. So let's go back and talk about hybridization and how you think that works. And I have this list here of what you and I have come up with of the 128 hybrid children that I have living on and off planet, that I've known that I had a lot of hybrid children, but I never really understood exactly why me. Was I feeling pregnant basically my whole teenage and college years? Why did I end up with so many of these children? What were they coming to me for? And we know that I have my special gifts, you have your special gifts, everyone has their special gifts. But would you like to talk a little bit about that? And then we can go through a few of the hybrid children that are on and off planet that you've been helping unearth me.
Sure.
And I worked at NASA. I worked at design firms for many years and worked on everything from the Star Trek logo. And I was a designer one of the designers on the International Space Station for NASA. I've worked locally and globally. And I knew I went on a craft at age 5 years old with my father. And he was there with me holding my hand so I wouldn't be nervous. And I never understood he was not able to talk to me about that experience because he was working his company, his aeronautical aerospace company that he and his father and his grandfather had started in the 1880s or 1890s, 1893 had started. And I didn't know why they wouldn't speak to me about it until recently. And my dad has passed and he's opened up now about it. And he was part of the U.S. government. He was part of the military. He was a Navy lieutenant and pilot in World War II up in the Aleutians. And he was part of working with NASA. So it was NASA, the government. Werner von Braun worked with him. He was involved with secret space, and I have been too. So why he couldn't speak to me until really the last few months that I've been reaching out to him with your help, is he couldn't. He said, Mary, we weren't allowed to talk about that. So part of my mission is not only just as a designer and an artist and a teacher, is to really help children and parents, all age people, to really get more conditioned and prepared for ET contact so they didn't live a life of loneliness, fear, confusion, with not having other people talk to them about it. And my dad and my mom couldn't because of this. They were sworn to secrecy, and many people still are today. But I'm not. I'm coming out because I want to help others who lived like I did, older people, younger people who don't understand what it's like to understand what that contact was, who that gray was, what they did. And I've learned over my lifetime, and more recently I continue to learn, is what a blessing it's been, what support and love that I've gotten in learning on craft at age 5 and 6 and 10 with stats and information that have helped groom me with my design and architecture and sustainability background on big projects, small projects all over the planet, and now off planet. So, and you know this better than anyone, because I keep saying to Dave, why me? Why do they want to work with me? And how far does this go back? So we know now that I've had many, many lifetimes as a healer and design, that thread has continued through my 94 generations of our family. Mostly engineers. My mom's dad was an architect who standardized 2x4s, and then I had 2 rocket scientist grandparents, and my mom's dad and her father were architects. So I grew up with Earth, space, and outer space, and have been trying to weave together my love of art and aesthetics into interiors on Earth. And then at age 10 and throughout up until recently, I've been going up and working on inside of other projects in the Pleiades and subsurface habitats on most all the planets in the solar system, which I'm just talking about really now because it sounds pretty crazy. My whole life was crazy enough not understanding why I saw spirit animals and UFOs floating around in the sky on and off over my lifetime, and also being so hypersensitive to light and nature with all my learning issues that I have, which is dyslexia and ADD and PSTD that I see as gifts and also struggles. But you really understand the whole process, and we've been detailing it over the last several months. So, could you share a little bit about what you've learned so we can talk about basic what are hybrids and hybridization? They are real. I am
Yeah,
a human hybrid. I'm 16% human, and the rest I'm all these other wonderful species here to help heal the planet as you are and most of us are today. So if you could weave it together with your beautiful story, we'd love to hear that too. So you really understand
sure.
so many layers of this that I don't yet.
Well, hybrids have been discussed in books and other inspired experiences that people have had, oh, probably for 30, 40, 50 years. When people started talking about it, their initial concept was this is a person who half their genetic material is human and the other half is some form of ET. As people started working with this, they started speculating that maybe some of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs were hybrids, because it appears that some of them may have had an altered head shape, and so you may have seen some of the pictures on some of the websites where it shows them with an extended cranium going
Sure.
back, and
Well, even
they,
back to Adam and Eve, way back, all the way back, really,
yeah, yeah.
and from Christ coming
So
down. Yeah.
so the sort of the traditional wording on what is a hybrid is a strict genetic experiment, just like Gregor Mendel did with his peas. So we have people, you might be 50-50 hybrid. If you're a child of somebody who's a hybrid, you might be 25-75, depending on how we follow the standard genetics. Um, this seemed to make a fair amount of sense. I have actually seen women in a few meetings that things that would have to do with the paranormal or metaphysics, where obviously from their facial construction and from their eye shape and eye placement, um, typically the ones I saw, it was like their eyes were a little wider apart and they tended to be a little wider on the outside, tapering into the middle. And the other thing I noticed is that most of them were incredibly beautiful. And um, when they came to these meetings, they'd be dressed to the nines. They would be overdressed for the meetings, like they sort of didn't get it. What is the appropriate attire? And then when they noticed me or other people suddenly noticing them, the sunglasses came out. They quickly gathered their stuff and left the meeting and disappeared. Because at some level they knew maybe telepathically that they'd been outed, so to speak. So that was sort of the classic view of hybrids. If we dig a little bit deeper to the next level, if we look at our genetic DNA strands, um, we have 23 pairs, and there's some people out there who speculate that we have 23 pairs because we have roots in the skies as star seeds from 23 different races. Um, I would just have to say I just cannot buy into the idea that we had a chemical soup here on the planet, and now that chemical soup we came up with self-replicating molecules that were the spark of life, and those continue to evolve. Um, I think the Earth was seeded by maybe comets could bring genetic material. A lot of people in NASA will sort of agree to that versus just a pure it came out of nothing on the planet. Other people go farther and say I think that there were beings that placed humans here, and they can even cite Adam and Eve because Adam and Eve has a peculiar passage where God was walking with them through the Garden of Eden, talking to them as if he was a physical being. And if you go back to some of the stuff from Alexander Sitchin, his translations show that these beings, the Nephilim, not the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, who supposedly come here periodically, that they may have sort of found a very primitive race on the planet and they upgraded their intelligence so that, at least for the bad guys in the Anunnaki, we could become slaves who would go down and mine gold because apparently for some reason they needed gold on their planet or for their well-being. And but in the Bible, you get to just talk about some of the gods or walking among us being giants, and then they took on human wives and had kids, and then they ended up getting slammed, and possibly either the Sodom and Gomorrah story or the Noah's Ark story was postulated as being possibilities for we need to wipe out these quote hybrids again. Here comes the term again. That they were unnatural and that they were rebellious against God. They were told, whatever you do, don't shack up with an earth woman, and they did it anyway. And so they were supposedly punished for it. But a number of years ago, I started getting stuff. I get a lot of downloads. I get a lot of examples being shown to me by the spiritual plane. And I just started feeling and being driven that I do a lot of sophisticated muscle testing. I use the level of consciousness scale from David Hawkins' Power versus Force. But I really started getting that people were being energetically hybridized. It wasn't just a pure 50-50, human egg, ET sperm, or anything like that. They were being energetically hybridized. Plus, it could happen on a dynamic scale. So, when you're born, you might be X. When you're 30 years old, you might be 2X. And when you're 50 years old, you might be 3X. And so I started checking against categories. And my standard row when I work with clients is what percentage human? And this is 0 to 100%. What percentage ET? Consciousness, energy, what percentage angelic out of the angelic realm, what percentage gods and goddesses. Well, the gods and goddesses are a group under the Creator that were created to help early humans on the planet to succeed. They were the helpers, and they became the stuff of mythology, even though mythology is terribly distorted and sort of an unfair treatment. It makes them very petty. Which they aren't. I talk to them too. And then we also have ascended masters and teachers as another category of some of the hybridization, and then smaller percentages likely for things like the jinn. That's where we get the term genie from. So that's another race that's on the planet. Dragon energy, Sasquatch type energy, some of those things. And interesting things have come out of that. I find typically people start out at birth, usually between 80 and 100% human. As they go through life, especially if they're on a path of spiritual development or things are being revealed to them, I find that sometimes they pop up very high in ET or very high in angelic. But this is one of the strange things on this. I started finding in some cases that parents would come to me where they had adult children who were not coping with the world very well, or even teenagers. And what I found is in some cases that they had an excessive amount of either ET or angelic. And from what I could see, they were not prepared for the experience yet. And people say, well, how could they not be prepared? Well, the average ET who's a good guy may be philosophically prepared for how rough Earth is in terms of people kill each other here. There's no guarantee as a human that you will be given sufficient food, clothing, or shelter to survive, or even clean water. There's no guarantee. Right. And to most of the good ETs out there, this is just incredible. They can't believe that we'd be walking around the planet and we don't take care of everybody.
Well, I do happen to have my chart right there. I'm one of those people, and now I'm even in the last. Do you have my chart right there? Do you have it?
No, I don't have.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I
yeah. Well, just because when I
I do.
when I met you a couple of years ago, I was 40% ET because I love numbers and I wanted to find a rocket scientist like my father who was also spiritual like my father, and I found you, Dave. And share with them what that is. I mean, I'm now 16%.
16% human, 56% ET, 18% angelic, 4% gods and goddesses, 4% ascended masters, and 1% jinn. Now, if you were an unbalanced person, then that ET energy that says, oh my goodness, look how rough Earth is, you might end up staying inside, never socializing, never going outside, avoiding newspapers, appearing to have a lot of odd, quirks to your personality because you aren't prepared for it. And so,
Well, Dave, I've
um,
had that my whole life. I mean, I
yeah,
love nature. I had 22 lifetimes in nature, but the hypersensitivity that I have, that I've always had, and particularly more and more since I did the book with Barbara, since I've been doing this work, since I've been off planet a lot, it's been terrifying, and it hurts. It hurts me physically, emotionally. The light is bright. The sensation of the color is just insane and beautiful, but the sadness of the of people dying, of starving. That's why I worked with homelessness for 40 years.
hmm
I've worked with veterans forever. I've always wanted to help those who needed help. So it has been, even coming out and me talking on a show like this was a big deal for me, even though I've done a lot of other things publicly.
hmm
I I think, and then we're coming more and more into a more sensitive, smarter, more creative and imaginative group. The kids that are coming in are more advanced and will need special teaching and more support.
hmm
But anyway, what you've watched me grow. I mean, now
yeah, yeah.
I have to ground myself all the time. I'd much rather be floating off doing something else. It's much easier up there dealing with taxes. Oh my God. Hate that. And I hate the meanness. And I was bullied for my learning issues when I was small, and I felt like
hmm
I wasn't being told the truth, and I wasn't. And yeah, I grew up in a beautiful home and a wonderful family, but it was always just going, what are people doing here? The way they spend their money, the way they're not taking care of the people who really need it here on earth. I've always
hmm
been, I'm strong and I'm also very fragile and sensitive. But I have to really ground myself every day, and so I can go elevate because I spend a lot of time off planet zooming around. So I think us ET human hybrids are um, are different. I mean,
yeah.
we are all different and hypersensitive. The ones I've met and seen too, like
hmm
me, are, and you are all different. And what drives us is our need and desire and love and passion and mission to help other people come to terms with
hmm
whatever skill set we were given. So can we talk about what you've learned too about my 94 generations of space DNA and what you've sort of learned from that, because you tracked it down to 0 AD up until the present with
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
different hybrid programs and the gifts that I have and that my father has. Could you talk about what you've seen, what you think mine are, and how I'm here helping?
Well, we'll
Well,
talk
it's
about
hard
the
for me to
bigger.
figure myself
We'll,
out. I mean, I
we'll
know.
talk about the bigger picture of long genetic trains on this planet. Um, we just recently had Queen Elizabeth pass, and why wasn't Prince Philip in line to be the King of England? Well, he wasn't genetically linked to the line of Elizabeth.
Right. And my
Uh,
family on both sides go back to kings and queens. There is a real pecking
yeah,
order, man. You, if you're not,
absolutely.
you're not
And
one of those. You don't count.
if we look at now King Charles III
Yes.
with Camilla, Camilla can be the queen consort, but she cannot be the queen on his death because she's not genetically in the path.
Right.
If we go back to ancient biblical times, why was it important to lay out Jesus' lineage? Well, one part of it was they had mistaken belief that he was going to be the king of the Jews. Essentially, he's going to be the leader who is going to lead them out of Roman control. And Jesus kind of had to straighten them out and say, you got me confused with somebody else. I'm not here as that kind of king. And but when you look at later on the writings in the New Testament, they very much wanted to point to his lineage through the house of David and the lineage through Joseph and the lineage through Mary. Well, if you go back into the Bible in the Old Testament, there's a couple of books there, Kings and Chronicles, that just give you lists and lists of who begat who begat who begat who. It was very important to them to look at that lineage. So we have a lineage there. We have a lineage through the kings and queens of Europe, through all the countries, and gosh, there was so much intermixing there between the different groups, and Ottoman Empire, and all the Italians and the Germans and the Russians, and even Philip had to change his name because he had Germanic names in there, and that's pretty unpopular coming up to World War II. Um, so we do have a tradition on this planet. We have it in ancient Egyptians. We have it probably in ancient Mayans, that there is a genetic lineage that determines who's who and what's what. And it was very important to them. And there's even those who speculate that, and I think there's a fair amount of truth to it, that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. They did have children, and that lineage from those children still exists today, and it's just kept in a very secretive way so that they're not outed
Right,
or held up, because there's an awful lot of people who don't like that story
right,
out of their religious viewpoint. That would be very threatening to them.
right.
Um, and so now we stumble across you, Mary, and suddenly we find that, yeah, you do have a lot of lineage in you. You do have a lot of famous people in your lineage. You do have both technically oriented people and people who were in royalty at various points in your lineage. And what it really came down to when I started checking with the intuitive sources that I have, um, Mary's lineage goes clear back to about 0 AD, and it came through that they've sort of been tending the garden over the generations, and occasionally doing upgrades, occasionally um, moving people out of the lineage who the genes just didn't come together right. Um, there's a lot of genetic control that ETs feel they can exert. I think they are still somewhat subject to the idea that there's a randomness on which particular genetic matching you get. Well, why does a family with no red hair occasionally pop up a red haired kid? Well, something unexpected happened genetically. Um, when you do 23andMe and you look at your roots and you say, "Oh, I'm 10% Native American," well, you may have a sibling who comes up 5% and another sibling comes up 20%. It just sort of depends on what happened when the roulette wheel was spun on the genes that came through and the genetic material when conception occurred. And so there still is a randomness to that isn't necessarily in control. We have people here who dream of using gene sequencers to build the exact sequence they want, but there's a heck of a lot of genetic material that they just call essentially filler material,
Right.
which other people are now disputing that, saying no, there's messages and things in there, but there's a lot in there we don't understand and we don't control, and we wouldn't know how to build it right. And so we continue to learn, but I think these space beings don't necessarily have what we would think is, wow, you're so advanced, you fly around the universe, you have spacecraft, you can bop in and out of our reality, and yet I don't think they have necessarily full control over what are going to be the genetic outcomes of mixing material. So they're still learning too. So in your case, Mary, as we go through generation after generation, there's probably going to be some pruning of the bush.
Oh, of
To
course.
get rid of some branches and some roots that don't fit quite right. And there's just been that gentle touch over many generations of watching. Now, 2,000 years sounds like a heck of a long time to us because Gosh, that's 100 generations if you take 20 years per generation. A lot of the ETs live to be 500, 600 years, 1,000 years old.
Right,
Um, Not a big deal to them. In fact, they may be waiting for us to hurry up.
right,
Think about a being who has 1,000 year lifetime who's still alive now, and you think, wow, they go clear back to knights in armor in Europe and fighting over England in the Battle of Hastings, all the way up through our progress. I truly believe that we've had a lot of ET help and inspiration for a lot of our major inventions.
well, of course we have. Look at Elon, I mean, everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
So can you, and also too, my ET, we've gone through, I've found I have 125 ET human hybrid children that are range in
Hmm.
age from 5 to I think it's 35 or something, that are all over the planet, and that's been really interesting to track down and find out who some of my human hybrid children are, that are in a lot of them are 27, 22, 24, that live in China, three in China, several live in South America. A lot of them love space. They know they were adopted. They know they came to Earth. They don't really know who I am. A few of the kids in the Pleiades happen to know who I am. But what I've been doing here is they have woven together, I think, from my family genetics, my art, and working on off planet a lot and doing things here. It's what I do to manifest my love and my skills, as we all do. And what's
Hmm.
fascinating is talking to my dad many times, who passed about 10 years ago. He sees me now and he said, yes, all the work you've been working hard your whole life to do what you're doing, like you have and we all have. But I just find it fascinating to see some of the threads in some of the children. I have two Earth children, and then of course 128 of these kids that I hope at some point I'll be able to maybe be in contact with if they're interested too. So I feel like I've been connecting inner and outer space my whole life with design and art and aesthetics, and I'm now doing it off planet. And all I want to do is help anchor myself and others into mind, body, spirit, and home, as I know you do with your daily work.
Hmm.
And I just think it's fascinating to see where we're going to go from here on out. All these indigo kids, all these brilliant young children that are coming in now. And I did ask you a while ago, do you think mom and dad, they sort of help my parents find each other, because we're all from European
Hmm.
English and have mostly, and I married an Englishman. And I said, do you think that must have been something? Of course, it's free will. I can marry who I want to, but there's all that connection, and fascinating that it's all coming out now, that we can change our DNA, that we can
Hmm.
fine tune everything. So, can you talk a little bit more about that too? Because I think that's so interesting that we can really shift. I mean, it's not only we are what we eat, we are what our mothers ate. we can, our thoughts are, if we're fear based, or we can be anybody and feel anything if we have the confidence or the skills or the training or the
Hmm.
letting go of some of that fear and negativity that we've gotten throughout the generations. And I know you did say, and I felt this always when I was born, I know that you said they helped clean out maybe some of the ego or the money stuff that was there. So I know that the ETs have been helping me all the way along,
Hmm.
all the way along. A couple of Palladians were here checking out my space last week, right here, saying, "Oh, it's so clean, and we love your color, we like your art, we like what you're doing off planet and on planet." Can you talk to that a little bit, because it's really fascinating to really have other people sort of help validate me and what we do on Earth with what
Hmm.
we're doing. Because people say, well, how can you be spiritual if you create spaces that are high vibration art and spaces? How do you do that? And I go, a lot of it's intuitive. A lot of it's because I went to design art school and design school and architecture school and that, and I've traveled the world, and I've always been open, and I got young travel around the planet. And I've always known since I was a child that I was being helped and really loved and supported by the ETs.
Hmm.
So, and then now I'm teaching more art. I'm teaching art to mental health professionals, and I've been off planet working on all the solar system interiors. But can you just weave that together with my family DNA a little bit, so because it's always different coming from me than it comes from you. Just
Well,
those skills are.
this is it's hard to shock me or to greatly surprise me because of all the things I've seen. But a number of years ago, one really did, and it forced me to step back and think about things a lot. Here's a scenario. So I have a pyramid in the spiritual plane that was created for me to do healing in. And in one part of the pyramid, there are a number of treatment tables, and I would go there routinely in my meditation and do long distance healing on people, and the people would be placed on these tables. In one of those scenarios, I looked up and I expected to see the usual doctors in spirit who would be helping the angels, Archangel Raphael, others, maybe Edgar Casey, who knows who might show up to do healing. But in this particular day, I looked up and there were a number of ETs standing there.
Hmm.
And it really threw me because I realized how much my indoctrination as a child in the Episcopal Church had happened since my dad was an Episcopal priest. There was this gut feeling for me that, wait a second, this is our heaven. This is our human heaven. This heaven is for humans. This heaven is for people who have been sold as humans and they've died and they've gone back to heaven and they are still human in form and intent. And here were ETs in quote our heaven. Uh, and it sounds, it almost sounds racist or something when you say it,
It does. Yeah,
but
it is.
that's why it really forced me to go back and look at this. And
I
uh,
believe we're in heaven on earth every day.
yeah,
And
yeah,
every day is heaven on earth. Look at our beautiful earth that we get to
hmm
live on with fairies and butterflies and water and starry nights and
hmm
magic that we see every day here if we choose to see it that way, right?
yeah.
So,
So I had to puzzle through this, and what I discovered is that a lot of ETs are so energetically and spiritually advanced that they can bounce in and out of incarnations without going through a birth and death cycle like we experience. And our heaven is actually just another vibrational plane that some of these advanced ETs who can move through different vibrational planes, they can reach, which also has implications about, is our heaven a special place reserved for us by God, or is our heaven a place created by God for us to have an experience out of body so that we continue to grow and mature? It also says that, my feelings are, and a lot of people, have written about this, that when we take on an incarnation here, it follows a life chart. And a life chart is something that was created to give us a specific set of experiences and challenges and opportunities so that we would grow. And treating it as sort of like the school model is kind of like our syllabus and it's what we're going to go through. And we're going to hopefully accomplish this stuff and not just give up and commit suicide or something silly like that. And so that would also have you believe that it says that maybe some of those life charts can also be affected by ETs who could be involved with the Council of Elders, and we could have some coordination there because ETs are just as much a child of God as humans are
yep.
in all their various forms. And for us to think that we have a special place with the creator of the universe who holds humans dear, and we just have this artifact of having other beings, is probably woefully inadequate to explain the spiritual beliefs around the universe. And so, um, in a lot of cases, we just have to welcome these ETs who are coming here to try and help us grow up.
Yeah.
Um,
Wake
we,
up, grow up, and
yeah,
that may want to get to know us.
yeah,
The Palladians have been telling me for 15 years that I'm going to help them come to Earth because of all my real estate design and stuff.
yeah.
Bring it on. Benevolent ones, yes. The sentient beings, we welcome you.
hmm
And they are coming. They're already here hiding in forests and Middle Earth and under the oceans and hovering above us, the skies, waiting for us, hoping that we don't do something stupid nuclear or ruin our planet,
hmm
which we won't. But we are going to rise. We are going to shift this. And we are going to get to this level of vibration and consciousness to shift as many as we can that are pretty beaten. A lot of people are, as we know, are really beaten down. COVID didn't help. Post-COVID's, people are flipping out,
Yeah.
as we know,
Hmm.
and a lot of people are dying that can't cope on the planet. But there is the hope, and we only have a couple more minutes, but the hope is, and the knowledge is that we can and will and are really helping raise and rise and shine to lift the
Yeah.
rest of us up. So, um, anyway, what are your parting thoughts on that too? Because we are hopeful people, and we believe, and are here to help this shift. And that's
I
why
think
we're here now.
we're wonderfully primed to evolve. I think there's many helpful races of ETs, star brothers, who are actively here. A lot of them are walking in plain sight. They can disguise themselves enough that you pass by them in the store. When I muscle test, I get 3 to 5% of every being or person you see out walking the streets is not from planet Earth. So that should give you a little bit of pause about who you see in the store and looking a little bit closer at them and just saying,
I do. I've seen.
Are you
I
from
was like,
here?
woo. Right.
Tell me where you're from, and I don't mean on this planet.
Right.
Um, you can have fun with that, but it's um, they're there in a sincere, heartfelt effort to help us help our feelings and our emotions and our morals catch
Yes.
up with our technology, because our technology is kind of beating our morals to the door in some of the cases, and it's just we do things that are inappropriate to each other.
Right. And I think with that loving kindness and the like you say, and the gratitude and just being
Hmm.
nicer to each other. What happened to just loving kindness? But it is coming back. The love army is here. And I
Yeah,
just want to thank you so much for being here today. And I think people would probably like to know how to reach you. And I think it's davethemystic.com. Is that correct?
that works. That
At
works great.
davethemystic.com. And Dave lives in Littleton, and so that's Colorado time zone, but he has really helped me tremendously unpacking a lot of these things that I'm either too shut down by my own past experiences or programs, and I'm hoping to wake up to, and I will be doing that for a long time with you, my friend. So I really appreciate your time and your beautiful energy and all your skills to help
Well, thank you.
move us along, keep me positive, and keep me clean. So, thank you.
Thank you. This has been a fun journey.
Good, it sure has. To be continued next
We
time.
continue. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.